Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first episode of Don't Knock It, the series where I take your least favorite ingredients and make something delicious out of them. Fangs of Bahamut says he doesn't like oysters, which so happens to be one of my favorite ingredients ever, so today I'm going to make him one of the most simple and cheap oyster dishes I can think of: Italian broiled oysters. Before we begin preparing this dish, it is really important that you soak your oysters in cold water for at least 30 minutes to wash away any bad tasting impurities. If you want to save some time, you can heavily salt the water before soaking, and the soak will only take around 10 minutes instead. While the oysters are soaking, we can start preparing our stuffing by adding 2/3 of a cup of Italian breadcrumbs to a mixing dish. I'm using panko here since my wife is allergic to sesame. After that, I am adding 1 to 2 teaspoons of red pepper flakes depending on how hot you want it. Just please don't leave these out entirely, I promise it won't be that spicy. Next, we have 1.5 teaspoons of dried onion powder, which we use to prevent the moisture of a real onion from making the stuffing too soggy. Next, we have roughly a teaspoon of dried parsley, which gives a little green to the final product in both taste and appearance. And here I decided last minute to add a couple pinches of shredded Parmesan cheese. The seasoned chefs watching this are likely screaming at me not to mix cheese and seafood, but it works amazingly here to create a nice texture to the cooked stuffing. On top of that, I'm going to squeeze half a lemon's worth of juice into the mix to add some acidity to this super savory stuffing, alongside some melted butter to bind it all together. So mix all of those ingredients up thoroughly, make sure it's all homogeneous, and go grab your now fully soaked oysters for shucking. Now, as per rule number 2, I will not be using a shucking knife here since it is not a common household cooking tool, but that's okay. We can use a regular butter knife here. With a little bit of effort, it will work just fine. So find the skinnier end of your oyster, which is the hinge side, slip your butter knife about 1/2 inch into that joint, give it a twist, and peel the shell apart just like so. Now, with a shucking knife, you would normally scrape the inner walls of both the top and bottom shells to free the meat before you separate the shell, but in this case, using the butter knife, it's way easier to peel it apart and release the meat afterward. If you do it carefully enough, you should still get a pretty nice result. Once the oyster is properly shucked, you can begin placing your stuffing on top of them. Use just enough stuffing to cover all or most of the meat on top. The goal here is to keep the meat itself away from the broiler heat using the stuffing as like a sort of insulation. This will assure that the stuffing gets a nice crispy texture and that the meat gets warm but not rubbery from being too cooked. Once all of the oysters are stuffed, go ahead and arrange them evenly on a baking tray and place them in your oven on the highest broil setting you could set your oven to until the stuffing turns a medium to dark brown color. While we're waiting for those to cook, now is a great time to stress the importance of cleaning your working surfaces as often as possible while cooking. This will not only prevent contaminating future dishes, but also prevent the nasty smell of the oysters from seeping into your cutting board, which will happen if you leave the juices on there. For me, it only took about 5 minutes in the broiler to create our finished Italian-style broiled oysters. These are super savory with a nice acidic kick to cut through the hardiness of the oysters, which allows the consumer to down dozens of these before getting tired of them. Feel free to spray some lemon juice on these and perhaps add a drop of your favorite hot sauce like I did. Thanks for watching, and let me know what your least favorite ingredients are down in the comments.